TA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking an early look at the upcoming TJD T101. Now this is a big screen handheld gaming console powered by a 7000 series Ryzen APU. And ever since this was announced, I've been wanting to get my hands on it, mainly because we've got a 10.1 inch display here. I mean, it's the biggest gaming handheld on the market right now. And before we get into it, I do want to mention that this is an earlier unit. This is one of their in-house testing prototypes. They were kind enough to send this over so we could take a look at it. The final product will be a little more refined when it comes to the overall aesthetic and the software, but this is fully functional and it's in 80 grams, so almost 2.4 pounds, which is definitely a lot beefier than the Steam Deck. So this thing is a hoss. If you've got smaller hands, this one's definitely not for you. With the T101, we've got a much larger display and a larger battery. Battery on this is coming in at 60 watt hours as opposed to 40 watt hours in the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally. Taking a look at the overall unit, we do have some RGB going on here. It is fully controllable from software. We've got Hall-based analog sticks and Hall-based linear triggers. Down here on the bottom in the lower left-hand corner, there's a 3.5mm audio jack and a micro SD card slot. And taking a look at the I/O up top, we've got a full-size USB 3 port and two USB Type-C ports. Now one of these is USB 3.2, the other is USB 4, running at a 40 gig protocol, so connecting an eGPU is really simple. We've also got our volume rocker and our power/fingerprint sensor up top here. But when it comes to the buttons and the D-pad, it's using dome switches behind them. We don't have any conductive pads here with the buttons or the D-pad, so some people might not be into this, but the D-pad here functions much better than I thought it would. It also has some custom buttons, and over here on the left-hand side, we've got a Windows button, which will bring us home or open up the search bar at any time. Plus, we've got an on-screen keyboard button, so we can bring that up whenever we need it. And over on the right-hand side, we've got a home button, which is going to function as our Xbox button. Now, this should all be mappable from software later on, but right now, that's how it's set up. Plus, there's a dedicated control center button, and with this, it's a proprietary software that will allow us to adjust the TDP, RGB, screen resolution, fan speed. We'll take a look at that in just a second. But I wanted to dive into the specs here because we've actually got a pretty beefy handheld. Now when it comes to the APU they opted to use, there's actually two options, but the one I have here is the highest end version. We've got that AMD Ryzen 7 7840U. It's based on Zen 4, and we've seen this chip in a lot of handhelds recently. Base clock of 3.3 GHz with a boost up to 5.1. This will do up to 30 watts in the handheld, but that's with its own software. Using third-party software, you could take it up a bit higher than that if you wanted to. When it comes to the GPU, it's got that AMD Radeon 780M iGPU based on RDNA 3, 12 compute units, and this will run it up to 2700 MHz. 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM, depending on the version you choose, but both of them are going to be using LPDDR5X running at 7500 megatransfers per second. We've got a huge 10.1 inch 1200p IPS display at 60 Hz with a maximum brightness of 500 nits, a 1 to 2 terabyte PCIe 4.0 M.2 NVMe SSD, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, Hall-based sticks and triggers, dual vibration motors, a 6-axis gyro, and a 60 watt-hour battery with 100 watt quick charging capabilities. Plus, we've got dual front-facing 2-watt stereo speakers here. So with the unit I have here, I'm running Windows 11. Taking a look at these special feature buttons, we've got our Windows button. This will bring us home or bring up our search bar. We've also got a on-screen keyboard button. And our home button, which at the time of making this video is actually acting as an Xbox button, so we can bring up the Microsoft game bar at any time. And finally, we've got our control center button. So the software I have is actually in Chinese, but I've got a good idea of what everything does here. Full control over the built-in RGB. We can change it any color we want. We can also change the brightness directly from the control center. We've got our TDP control. We've got a 4.8 watt for indie gaming, 6 watts and 15 watts, but we can go up to 30. It's a little bit of a different process right now because it's a very early unit. Fan control down here at the very bottom, and we can see what's going on at any given time with the hardware. So the way it looks right now, we've got TDP and fan control covered from within Windows, and I do want to mention this is a 32 gigabyte model, so we've got 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I've gone into the BIOS and dedicated 8 gigs of VRAM. But since we were running great at 15, I wanted to actually take it up a bit. We're at 28 watts, I'm now at high settings, 1200p with Forza Horizon 5, and we can average 86 FPS with this game. Auto 5 1200p, normal, and we're at a 15 watt TDP. I find that this game absolutely loves these Zen 4 APUs. That iGPU is more than enough at 1080 or 1200p right here, normal settings. And at 15 watts, we got an average of 63 FPS. Of course, taking it up a bit more, like a nice little spot is 18 watts with this APU I found across the board with all the handhelds that I've tested.